Hello everyone, welcome! In this video, I'm creating some cards using the May Simon Says stamp card kit called Brushed Flowers. I'm publishing this video on the last day of May, and I just barely got my June card kit from Simon Says Stamp in the mail, but I wanted to show you the fun designs I came up with using the May card kit. I'm running a little bit behind on my card kit, but let me quickly show you what was included in this fabulous kit. So it included some clear Simon Says Stamp embossing powder, which is really nice because my container is getting kind of old and I wanted to replace that. I love how Simon Says Stamp gives you things in their kit that you can keep on using for a long time to come. It also included some beautiful inks. And this was kind of fun this time. You get a mini pouch. I love the zipper pouches. I store all of my stamps in these, at least in the larger ones. I don't know what I'm going to do with this one yet, but I like pouches. And then you get this cute little cube holder. It holds your little mini cubes in place while you're inking them. Let me show you with these cubes. So they just fit inside this container really well. Then you can put the lid on top so you know what you're working with. And then it comes with a mini brush. I have a bunch of these in my stash and I just love them. They have really nice caps on them so that you can protect your containers or the drawer or however you store your brushes. And then you can rub on your ink and this little holder just keeps it in place so it's not swishing all over your desk. So very nice. I'm going to put that to good use. Next, you get a pink envelope. I like how you just peel it off to stick it. Here is a $5 off coupon for your next purchase. And then you get some pattern paper. These are very heavyweight, double-sided pieces. I really loved the color scheme of this set. I love all of the blues and yellows and oranges. And that striking red piece. So there is a wide variety in the sheets that they give you. Okay, this was my favorite piece. This stamp set is called Brushed Flowers. If you don't like coloring in your stamped images, this is a perfect one. All you have to do is ink them up and stamp them and you can be done. So here is the example page as well as the kit contents. They always have beautiful examples for you and inspiration. And then you get a white, a black, and a pink cardstock. I believe this kit has sold out, but you can buy the elements separately if you're interested in any of these. I will list them in the description box. So let's start off with card number 1. I'm going to use this pretty blue and pink piece of cardstock. And I'm going to cut this down into 3 by 6 inch pieces. So I'm going to create 2 cards with this one piece of pattern paper. Let me just make sure I'm measuring it right. And then I'm going to make up a bunch, or actually 2, mini slimline cards. So let's cut up some of the pink cardstock for this. I'll make the pink cardstock a little bit larger than my pattern paper. And this is a really nice heavyweight cardstock. I believe it's called Dull Pink. I'm going to use 2 different sentiments from the stamp set for these cards. And the sentiments are really pretty in this stamp set as well. I'm going to cut out a place for each sentiment using a circle die from Spellbinders. Let me take this off camera and just quickly cut that out. Here it is. And then I'm going to stamp the sentiment right in that circle. So we'll use Sending Hugs first. I'll get that placed, and then I'm going to pop it into my MISTI and stamp it out. I like to stamp it out at least twice, just to get a nice, good impression. And I'll use my Versamark ink. But first, I do like to use some anti-static powder. This will help keep the embossing powder from sticking where I don't want it to stick. So let's ink it up one more time. I'm going to use the clear embossing powder, which provides a really pretty look on this card. It just turns it a bright pink. Let's pour over the clear embossing powder. And then I'll allow my heat tool to warm up for a minute. And then I can melt this. I'm trying to melt it without warping the cardstock, but it does end up warping a little bit. But I allow this to sit overnight. I just stack my MISTI on top of it and some other heavy things, and it flattens it out again. Look how pretty that is, the hot pink. I wanted it to be a little bit darker, so I am going to pop this back in my MISTI and stamp it again and cover it with some white embossing powder. I just wanted the sentiment to be a little more bold. So let's pour on some white embossing powder now. I'm using some Brutus Monroe Alabaster embossing powder for this. Then I can melt it again, and I like the brightness of this much better. And the white embossing powder matches a lot of the elements on the pattern paper. Helps to bring out the white in the pattern. I'll use my dot liner to attach this to the pink cardstock. So this is a very simple card. I'm just allowing the pattern paper and the stamp sentiment to do most of the work for me. No coloring needed. However, I am going to tie a pink and white twine bow at the bottom of the circle. It just needed a little touch of something more. To make sure that this bow stays in place, I'm going to pull out a micro dot and just put behind this bow. And then I can trim off the ends. I'm adding a few pink sequins from Spellbinders. These sequins are pretty because they don't have the hole in the middle, yet they're still multifaceted. They look really gorgeous. And then we can glue this panel onto our card base. I cut this out to be 6 1/4 by 3 1/4. And here it is all done. I used the leftover circle piece on the inside. And here is the first one I created. So this was kind of a 2-for-1. Those circled die cuts look really pretty on the insides. Card number 2, I'm going to tack my piece of cardstock in my MISTI to keep it in place so I can do a bunch of stamping. This is a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock that I'm using. The Bristol Smooth is really great for when you want to do some ink blending, which is what I'm going to do after I do my stamping. So I'm going to stamp out a few of the stems and leaves first, just at the bottom of this panel. I'll use some of the inks that came in the card kit. I'm using some anti-static powder first because I will eventually be embossing over these. But first, let's start out with the ink called Lucky. This is a really pretty bright green ink. And I do end up stamping these out twice, but I just show one stamping. These ink pads are really juicy. Next, I'm going to clean off my stamps as well as I can and ink them up again using some Versamark ink. I was worried about getting green ink on this pad, but it looks like I cleaned them well enough. Okay, so now let's stamp them up with the clear sticky ink. And we'll use the clear embossing powder that came in the kit. I'll peel up this panel and then just pour over the embossing powder. And again, I'll allow my heat tool to warm up before I bring it to the paper. So let's melt these now, and they turn bright, shiny green. I love the sketchiness of these leaves and flowers in this stamp set. They're so well drawn. I just love them. Now I'm going to pop this back in the MISTI and stamp the flowers next. I'll ink up 2 of them with the citrine yellow. And then the third one I'm going to use rose. This is such a bright pink magenta colored ink. It's so pretty. And then again, I'm going to clean off my stamps and ink it up with Versamark ink. I'll pour over more clear embossing powder. And then I can melt these and start in on my ink blending. Sometimes if I need to quickly flatten out my embossed panels, I'll run them through my die cutting machine with just the plates a few times, and that helps a little bit. Okay, so let's start with the ink blending. I pulled out some distress inks. This first one is Mowed Lawn, and I'll put that at the bottom. I'll speed this up here because it does take a little bit of time to do this. Next, I have Salty Ocean. And I'm trying to get a seamless blend between these three colors. The third color I'm using is Prize Ribbon, and it is a Distress Oxide ink. So I'll put another layer of color onto this panel. And I start to get my fingerprints in this ink. So I'm pulling out a piece of sticky note tape. And again, using the Bristol Smooth cardstock helps me to get a nice smooth blend with these three inks. I'll add a little more of the blue Salty Ocean and the Prize Ribbon at the top. And this panel is done. Next, I wanted to remove some of the blue ink on the insides of these three flowers because I wanted it more white. So I'm using some water just to paint over the insides of these flowers, and then I can dab up the color with a tissue. It doesn't pick up all of the ink, but enough to give it a difference from the background. And I'll do that with the yellow flowers as well. And now for some ink flicking. I'm using some sparkle silk from Spellbinders. It comes in this, it's like a nail polish bottle. And then you can just take out the brush and flick it onto your panel. And it's just a really bright, sparkly silver. You can really see it when I hold it in the light. Now, I wasn't overly fond of this panel. And when that happens, I find the best thing to save it is to cut it up. So I'm going to cut this down just a little bit. You could cut around all of the flowers, or sometimes I even cut down the middle of the flower and just attach them to the card coming off the side. But it helps to cut it up a little bit if you don't like your panel and you want to give it a different look. So I'm going to stamp on a piece of white cardstock my sentiment. I'll attach my flower panel up at the top, and I like this much better. I like the white areas of the card. I'll add a few teal sequins around the sentiment. And this card just turned out to be very simple, but yet it's fun to look at. I was pleased with the way it turned out. And here is a close-up look, and you can see the sparkle silk when I hold it up in the light, just at the right angle. I used the piece of blue sky cardstock on the inside. And now for card number 3. I love this pretty pink and red pattern paper. So I'm going to cut out 2 panels, one with the pattern paper and one with the black cardstock. These are some faux stitched dies. And this is going to be another fast and simple card. On the white cardstock that came in the kit, I'm going to stamp out a flower using the rose ink. And then I'll stamp out a stem using more of the Lucky ink. Or no, I'm sorry, I used the Ocean ink for this. This is such a pretty teal color. And then I will go ahead and fussy cut around these 2 images, leaving a white border. I'll go ahead and stamp the sentiment while I'm at it. I like sentiments that say just a note, or as this one says, just a note to say hello. I have a lot of these in my stash, and they're one of my favorite sentiments for some reason. I guess it's just because you can send them out anytime. So let's attach the black cardstock to the white top folding card base. And next we'll attach the pattern paper. I'll attach the stem down next, just using more of the dot liner. And I'm trying to gauge where to put it. This is just going to have a single flower on top of the pattern paper. We'll press that in place. And then the flower I'm going to pop up with some foam squares. The rose ink really matches this pattern paper really well. And then I used the teal instead of the green because there is some teal in this pattern. I'm going to pop up the sentiment as well. Now let's peel off the backing. And then we can just put this on top of the stem. I guess that's not really a stem, but I'm using it as such. And now for the sentiment. Let me pull out my tweezers. It's so much easier to use tweezers to get these in just the right place. I'm going to add some peach opalescent sequins from Spellbinders around this panel. Let me find a tray here and I can just pour these out into the heart tray. As another finishing touch, I pull out my glitter pen and I go over just the bloom. But first, let's put down just 3 sequins around this card. These sequins match the pattern paper very well. And then I can just use a little dab of glue and pop these in place. And here is a close-up look at the finished card. You can kind of see the glitter on top of the flower. When I hit it in the light, I put a piece of leftover pattern paper on the inside of the card. My next card is going to involve one of my favorite techniques, which is pattern paper stamping. I'm going to stamp out my own piece of pattern paper or design paper for this card. And this is a really fun technique. So I'm using the biggest stamp first, and I like to stamp it in 3s. I can always come back with more stamping later on. And then I'll stamp out my other selections in decreasing sizes. So my stamps are getting smaller and smaller, with the exception of this big bloom here. There was just enough space for it right there in the middle. And then this stamp includes cute leaf stamps. These are really small leaves. And then some circle stamps. I don't know why, but I really love little circle stamps. And I love to use them for this technique because they just fill in all of the extra space and add a lightness and airiness to the panel. And these little circles are very sketchily drawn as well. They're not perfect circles, but here is a close-up look at the finished panel. And I stamped this onto a piece of cream cardstock. I'll attach it to a white panel. I stamped out another bloom as well as my sentiment onto white cardstock. Then I used a Simon Says stamp banner die to cut out this next piece that's going on. I popped it up with some foam, and then the flower I'm going to glue down flat at the top, as well as the sentiment. And I just love the simplicity of this card, but yet it's really fun to look at because of all of the pretty stamps. Now let's go ahead and glue down the flower above the sentiment. I pulled out some gems to put in the center of this flower. I'm just using some of the smallest gems for this, and I'll put a bunch there, as well as around this panel, some of the larger ones. It just adds a really nice touch of sparkle. And here it is all done. And I think it looks really sophisticated too, with the black and the cream and the white. On card number 5, we're going to use this beautiful piece of blue and yellow and white pattern paper. So there is a lot of white in this pattern, so I wanted to stamp out a few of the images using some white embossing powder onto this piece of black cardstock that I cut out with an oval. When you're working with black cardstock, you always want to use some anti-static powder first, just to cut down on the strays of white embossing powder that can stick to the panel. And I'll ink it up with some Versamark ink. So I'm stamping everything but the top of the flower with this ink. And I will stamp it out twice. And then I can peel up all of the stamps on the door of the Mini Misty, and I can stamp out this tulip bloom. But I do have to get rid of the stem because I am going to stamp it out just slightly over the stem so it's touching. Let's ink up the tulip. And then we can pour on the white embossing powder. I'm using my tweezers to hold this oval just because I have so many images stamped on it that it'll help me not burn my fingers when I melt this powder. And again, I'm using the sentiment that says, "You are so special to me." Doesn't that look just so striking in front of this blue pattern paper? I decided to round the corners at the top of this panel using a 1/2 inch chomp. And then I wanted to pull in some white ribbon as well. So I'm going to tape it on the back of the panel using some double-sided adhesive. This is just some score tape and it's nice and strong. I'll tape it up at the top. Then I can just cut off the ribbon and that is ready to go. This black oval I'm going to pop up with some foam strips and center that on the card. And then I am going to tie a bow using more of this pretty white ribbon and use a micro dot to keep that in place. I can just press the bow into the micro dot. So I have to round the corners of my white card base. And then I can use some dot liner to attach my panel. I like to do that upside down so that if I need to trim anything off, it's just easy to trim off the bottom. I'm using a few of the peach sequins again. And that finishes off card number 5. And here is a close-up look. Simon Says Stamps card kits just never disappoint. I just love working with these. So I'll be creating with the June card kit really soon and have a video out for you on that one. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video and were inspired. Take care, everyone. Have a fun, crafty day. Bye.